I think it's raised our Good evening. Welcome everyone to tonight's Wednesday night fellowship presentation. Let's pray as we begin our time together. Holy Spirit, move us, we ask, this night. Move us from where we are to where you are. Move us to where our neighbors are. Move us to where you long for us to be. Take our hand and lead us there. We ask in your name that you may guide us by your presence with us always. Amen. Tonight's speaker is a longtime friend and mentor of mine, the Reverend Russ Postmay. Russ is co-founder and resident of Anthony's Plot community, rooted in the Sunnyside neighborhood of Winston-Salem. Russ is also a pastor with Come and Worship and co-founder of City with Dwellings, a network of friends who support the unhoused in our city. For many years, Russ's ministry has helped the church to engage more fully with the implications of the gospel, aware that the decisions we make each day have a direct impact on the lives of the people around us, including and especially those who often remain hidden from our view. Russ has enabled many to understand that God's promise of good news can become in us an embodied witness and a courageous expression of love, of justice, and of community. We are glad tonight to be given the opportunity to listen and learn together from Russ about the Sunnyside Freedom School and its partners. Russ, welcome back to Home Moravian Church.
So a couple of things as we get going. If you can't hear me, you can always tell me I can't hear you, or stop moving around, or we like this side better than that side, whatever is fine, okay? The other thing is on this table, because I'm not that interesting to look at, and so on this table are books from our Freedom School program that are for all the grades from K through 12. And so at any point, if you would like to, if you get bored with what I'm saying or need something more interesting to do, you can do it. When I was a kid and my dad would preach, I would go looking through the hymnals and play hymn roulette or something. So you can just grab a book and entertain yourselves if you need to. They're up here. And also up here is a little bit of information that's not intended to be a handout for everybody, but if you, at the end of it, say, I'd like to take something home with me to remind me of what we talked about, you can find some information up here, stacked right here. That's this table, which was your communion table, and now it's my display table. Thank you. At Come and Worship, we begin each Sunday with a piece of poetry, and I thought I would like to start with a piece of poetry. It's like our opening prayer, I guess. So I'm opening with, and do I sound okay? Or?
It's a little loud. I'm going to ask Sarah to turn it down a bit.
Yeah, okay. I'm a loud person. This piece of poetry is by Langston Hughes, and it's entitled, To You. To sit and dream, to sit and read, to sit and learn about the world outside our world of here and now, our problem world. To dream of vast horizons of the soul, through dreams made whole, unfettered, free. Help me, all you who are dreamers too. Help me to make our world anew. I reach out my dreams to you. I love the way that starts. To sit and dream, to sit and read, to sit and learn about the world outside of our world here and now. I can think of no better words to open with than these from Langston Hughes, which so capture the heart of freedom schools. It is a heart that if you were looking for it to be personified, it is best personified, I think, in the person of Marion Wright Edelman, who is the great link for us in the long legacy of freedom schools. Edelman spoke about the very same thing that Hughes poetically proposes when she said, quote, just as my parents and extended parents embedded in us children a sense of possibility that transcended the artificial boundaries of our segregated existence. All of today's parents and community leaders must try to give the young bulletins of the great world through books and great people, so that all children are provided a sense of life that transcends the artificial boundaries of race, gender, class, and things. And I hope you can hear the connection between those words and sentiment and that of Langston Hughes. We are sitting together with books and great people to transcend artificial boundaries that are holding children back. As we talk about freedom schools tonight, it feels as if it at all feels like I'm talking about just a summer program, I just want you to keep coming back to this. It is more than a summer program. It is very much about providing children a sense of life that transcends the artificial boundaries of race, gender, class, and things. And we do this work in freedom schools from the location of the classroom, or as she says, through books and great people, because, as Marian Wright Edelman also rightly stated, education is the precondition to survival in America today. Education is the precondition to survival in America today. Now, we don't have time to really explore all about Marian Wright Edelman, but she is the foundation of everything we will say today. And even so, she stands on the shoulders of others. In particular, Ella Baker. And I wore my Ella Baker shirt, in case you're wondering why I wore a t-shirt today. I wore my Ella Baker shirt. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Ella Baker may be the most important leader of the civil rights struggle that you just don't know a whole lot about, or maybe you do, and if so, I'm so grateful that you do. Again, not a lot of time here today, but you really should take time to look back at the 60s and find her many influences in the movement. In 1964, for example, there was an effort to bring college students from the North into Mississippi to register black folks to vote. And the notion was very simple here. These folks deserved representation, which was denied them at the voting booths whenever they encountered barriers of various sorts that existed to keep them from fulfilling their constitutional right to vote. So these college students arrived and they began registering and educating black folks so they could overcome the artificial barriers keeping them from voting. This was the Freedom Summer, which you may know about. While these students were out there, Ella Baker realized we could do so much more. And she started to organize them to teach the children of these adults they were registering to vote. This was necessary because the educational experience for black children was radically different than that for their white counterparts. They may have a building, but it was a shack compared to the schoolhouses of the white students. They may or may not have books. And their school day was interrupted by the fact that they had to often go to work with their sharecropping families. Ella Baker wanted to balance that by teaching during the summer using these college students that were already there. So they taught in churches, they taught in fields, they taught in the backyards of homes. They taught a mix of black history, of civil rights movement philosophy, of leadership development, and of course they did reading and math. This was the first freedom school. One of its admirers at that time was someone who was working on the Poor People's Campaign, who was asked by Dr. King to take on that role, and that was Marian Wright Edelman. In the 90s, Marian Wright Edelman returned to Mississippi, to the site of this freedom school in Mississippi, or the freedom schools of Mississippi. And she witnessed in the 90s something that was disturbing. In measurable ways, the gap between black and white educational opportunities and experiences and results had only grown wider in those 30 years. And Mississippi was not the only state where that was true. She said, quote, "Race and poverty still divide many of the socioeconomic and educational disparities that exist in America today. One example is the cradle-to-prison pipeline that is made up of so many factors and funnels tens of thousands of children and teens of color into a life of arrest and incarceration. She was seeing at that point the problems in the disparities and recognizing that those disparities were leading to the incredible rates of incarceration of black folks, especially black males, in Mississippi and other southern states. At that point, Edelman decided we need a new and an uninterrupted generation of freedom schools. We need to establish those. And so with her advocacy in 1995, freedom schools started back up. And we are in this era today. What Edelman was witnessing in the early 90s is still with us today, y'all. There are systemic gaps between the academic, scholastic experience of children of color and their white counterparts. To begin with, the resources that exist for schools are blatantly imbalanced. Right here you can see it happen. Majority white schools get faster approval for facility improvements. New books line their shelves. Safety measures are in place for their children's transport to and from schools. These are things that are often missing from schools that are located in communities of color. Even the community's interest is imbalanced. You may or may not know this, but not that long ago there was a shooting at Carver, and little attention was given to the trauma of those youth. A terrible tragedy, of course, we know happened at Mount Tabor. And even my own extended family at a dinner one day said to me, "Not Tabor, I didn't imagine that happening there." And the community's response has pretty much been appropriate to that, to be honest. The gap in resources and in attention shows up sometimes in the gap in books that resonate with students, and Edelman was paying attention to this. While every child does not have to have a book always that allows them to see themselves directly in the book, it doesn't have to be a book about them every single time, but the statistics around books that have people of color in it is pretty appalling. In 2000, a study by the University of Wisconsin found that I can tell you, My Side of the Mountain, Where the Red Fern Grows, Old Yeller, I love those books because I saw myself directly in them, myself and my dog. If you can't see yourself in the book, you will lose interest, and you will struggle to imagine yourself in positive ways. Positive ways, yeah, from like a moral character standpoint, you could say, but also occupationally. Like the way, if you don't see yourself as a president, you never see a president who looks like you, you'll think you're not allowed and you can't be the president. But it's like that for other things, astronauts and mathematicians and scientists too. Those figures, of course, are astounding, and they still show up in our schools. They still, most importantly, show up in our curriculum that we put into our public school systems. Another gap that she was bearing witness to was the gap in results. Black students not finishing school at the rate of their white counterparts, not seeing themselves going to college, not competing well at test scores. I want to look at that a little bit. Now, when we say things like, we're talking about like results, there's a lot of factors in like these kinds of results. Not completing school, when we say that, that's a complicated thing, but it includes the impact of biased discipline in schools against black males. Like that black males are far more likely to end up without a school suspension and expulsions for the same nonviolent disciplinary situations as someone who is white. So that's an impact, and it's a gap. Not going to college, again, that's a big kind of topic, a lot of issues there, but it includes the impact of not being able to imagine yourself going to college, which is also impacted by not having black teachers in the schools that are effectively mentoring that imagination within the students. Not competing at testing, that's probably the biggest challenge to talk about at all. Testing is just a complicated thing in and of itself. But it absolutely includes the impact that students of color too often hear, "You can't, you won't." And when they go into stressful situations, that narrative, that cassette tape emerges again, and testing is absolutely a stressful situation. So these were things that Marion Wright Edelman witnessed. when she restarted the freedom schools beyond Mississippi, and there are factors that are still within school systems and our school system today. Freedom schools. I want to give you some background, so thanks for that piece. Let me give you that piece. Freedom schools are summer and after-school programs. They are literacy enrichment programs designed to serve children and youth in communities where quality academic enrichment programming is limited or is cost restrictive, like it exists but you can't afford to get into it, or maybe it just doesn't exist at all sometimes. Freedom schools seek to empower scholars to excel and believe in their ability to make a difference in themselves and their families, in their communities, in their country, and their world. Freedom schools accomplishes this through a serious focus on literacy, and this is the jumping off point for all that we hope to accomplish, these books in their hands. It's a program that enhances children's motivation to read and makes them feel good about learning. Isn't that great? Like we do so many like test scores and program scores and all these kind of mathematical evaluations. And I'm just gonna sit here and tell you, our goal is to make them feel good about learning. But it is a baseline we have to achieve within the lives of our students. The approach is what some of us start to talk about as whole child, whole family, whole community, which means that the child's nutritional, mental, emotional wellness is as important as their reading. That the family's stresses and struggles should find support in the space where their kids are attending, in the Freedom School sites. And the connection to needed resources for these families. That's a commitment the Freedom School sites make to the families. We will help you get connected to resources you need. And the community, the whole community part. The community must be engaged with the process and the results of empowered and safe children and youth. We can't be sending kids off to school anymore and just say they'll get what they need in school. The community has to be an active part in what we're doing here. In Freedom Schools, the children learn the intrinsic value of reading, and we build their home libraries. Every one of these are books that we did. Every one of these represent books that now exist. Brand new versions exist in their homes. They get a new book every week. They build their home library. By the end of 3 or 4 years of Freedom School, they got a lot of books, all right? We celebrate their achievements. We call upon them to serve their community, and we watch them grow in civic awareness and in social responsibility. So before we get into some of the specifics about like the site that I run or any specific site, I want to name just a few aspects of Freedom School that are special. So this will be the last kind of philosophical piece here. Freedom Schools is built on culturally relevant pedagogy. I'm just going to say those words again because they're important and you probably know them already, but culturally relevant pedagogy. By the way, I'm not an academic, educational person. My mom was a teacher, and so she's the educational person in my family system. My wife is a preschool teacher. She corrects me all the time. That is not sound teaching there, you know? I am not. I'm just a good listener, and so if I repeat something that sounds smart, I didn't know it before like somebody smarter told me, and I'm still figuring out what it all means. Just need to say that. I'm a pastor. They didn't teach this in seminary. Sorry. So culturally relevant pedagogy is a complicated concept, but I want to try to express it. It's where Black students, for example, become partners in learning and in educational goals when they are invited into stories and history which is relevant and resonates in their lives. Like they can unlock mysteries and curiosities unseen by others like us when they understand themselves within the topic of learning. Like there are things in these books we don't understand, and they will unlock them because they are co-teachers in a culturally relevant pedagogy. Therefore, with the correct curriculum, not constantly Eurocentric, they become part of the story and not empty vessels to pour curriculum into, and that's the problem there. Our school system, by the way, had a powerful advocate for culturally relevant curriculum in Miss Rebecca McKnight, who passed away suddenly last year, and we have not replaced her. We need another torchbearer for this culturally relevant pedagogy in our schools. Anyway, Freedom School operates with this pedagogy. Freedom School is built also on social emotional wellness, which again is quite complex, but I'll just say that it is about the importance of how a student sees and feels about themselves and how that creates advantages or barriers to their learning. Freedom School does surveys to ask about how do the students see themselves as agents of change, or how do they feel about reading and learning and even going to school at the end of a summer of Freedom School. How's your confidence, in serving and learning? We think it's as important as testing their reading levels because they impact one another. Confidence impacts learning. If you're looking for a way to simplify this, I think this quote from one young scholar, an elementary school student, sums up the importance of social emotional learning and wellness, because the scholar is talking about things that were gained from Freedom School, but you don't hear, well, I learned how to read this many things, or I learned how to do math like this. He said, quote, "We have the brain, we have the mind, we're smart, we're strong, and we can do anything. We learned that at Freedom School. We can do it if we put our mind to it." That's social emotional wellness, and again, you can kind of build off of that to do many things in the life of a child. Okay, so again, all well and good, but what does Freedom School look like in action? A day during the 6-week Freedom School, there's 6 weeks during the summer, a day during the 6-week Freedom School begins at 8 a.m. with the scholars showing up for breakfast in the morning. We call them scholars, by the way, if you keep hearing me say that. After breakfast comes Harambe, and just this is a good check-in time. Everybody say Harambe. Yeah, you just can't help but say that like it's a good thing. Harambe, let's come together is what it means in Swahili. And Harambe is a celebration of the scholars, of community, of culture, and of learning. It's like a big old pep rally, but with really intentional outcomes here. We bring in read-aloud guests from the community every single day, and the read-aloud guest can be the mayor or our council person. It can be a scientist. It can be a neighbor, a teacher, but we're bringing them in and they read a book to these children that they've picked out, and they get to take questions from the scholars about, why did you like that book? Do you see yourself in that book? And it's a really powerful moment of encouragement for the kids. Then we sing our motivational song, Something Inside So Strong, which is the anthem from the anti-apartheid movement. And we sing it every single day, every single year that we do Freedom School. And they know that song. They have memorized it. They'll never forget it. They know movements to that song. And that's important because we're building a new cassette tape, a new narrative that's about what they can be and can do. Then we do cheers and chants, which get the scholars to proclaim to one another things like, there's no school like Freedom School. Reading books is really cool. And when I say it, it just doesn't sound cool, but when they do, they believe it. And there are other chants, many chants that they repeat and get to know. And then we end the time with a moment of silence to listen to the voice within say that we will have a great day today. Every aspect of Harambe is designed to enhance social-emotional wellness and, again, to rewrite narratives that might still say in their mind, I can't. You might have seen the thing, there's a meme that's out there that says, don't yell at your child before they go to school and expect them to have a good day at school. Right, that's all well and good, but you can't control everything your child experiences. They're hearing a lot of voices besides just parental voices. And when they come in through that space, even just consumerist voices, culture voices. And when they come into that space, we're actually trying to battle against all of that and say, no, we're going to have a good day because you are good, you are great. And that's the point of that. From Harambe, the scholars go to the integrated reading curriculum classrooms, and you'll hear me call them the IRC classrooms. This is the backbone, the core of the Freedom School program. Here, servant leader interns, that's what we call our teachers, who are mostly college students. They function as teachers for 10 scholars per class. They engage in reading and activities with these books as examples, and they adhere to the core standards. So there are standards that are trying to make sure that they are gaining it in measurable ways where the school can even measure, like a public school. The books seek to address the gap we mentioned earlier between books with good representation of people of color. There are heroes, heroines, and settings that reflect the children's own cultural images and history. They do cooperative learning, reflection, role-playing, discussions, visual and dramatic arts, creative writing, and so on. And they do this for 3 hours a day, every day of the week. The IRC classes are separated into levels. We have 4 levels, and it's K through 2, 3rd through 5th, middle school, and high school. At the end of the IRC time, each class then stops for a period of just reading, just 10 minutes of drop everything and read together to remind us that it's just good to do that sometimes. After lunch, the scholars spend the afternoon in enrichment activities. These are not defined ahead of time by Freedom School. We actually have to create these in ways that utilize our local resources and the interests of our scholars. Each site works to bring in community leaders who help facilitate excellent enrichment programs. In the past, we've done things like music, dance, spoken word, creative writing, art, drama, STEM activities. We even had a great STEM leader who had connections with NASA, and so we got to really see some cool things with him. We've done unique opportunities like podcasting, broadcasting, learned from a black chess master in Harlem how to be chess masters themselves through virtual learning. That was one of the benefits of the past year, getting used to virtual learning. We brought in people from all over the country to help. We did graphic designing, video game creating, eco-related activities. These are all things we try to pack into the second half of the day. And then once a week, we also do field trips. Some are fun, and some are like to the Civil Rights Museum, which we've gone on a couple of occasions. During the 6 weeks, other important events include the Day of Social Action, in which all scholars practice civic engagement with a singular theme. And last year's theme was youth justice. Our scholars met with leaders of our school system to discuss ways students of color receive more aggressive discipline than white students, those statistics I was mentioning earlier. And they proposed to the school system leaders that we should use our school budget. They actually were able to call out the exact amount in the budget that we use for things that should be reassigned to help with better mental health and emotional health and behavioral health support, like be preventative instead of reactive with the ways that we fund our what's called our safety measures in the school budget. The superintendent afterwards addressed them and each of the scholars and agreed to work on this with them. And actually that's the process we're in right now, which has become even more critical in recent days. So the goal of social action helps them to develop a voice for advocating around issues that are important to them and to show that they can be heard and they can make a difference. So since 2017, you could have seen that day in action at any one of our 3 Freedom School sites of Kimberly Park, Wake Forest University, and Sunnyside Freedom School. Sunnyside Freedom School is the one that I lead, and it is hosted by Moravian Church. So we had 3 starting in 2017. In 2019, the fall of 2019, I began to work to expand the number of Freedom School sites in Forsyth County, and we used a report that had come out at that point that showed that we had 8 schools in the Winston-Salem Forsyth County school system that were failing and at risk of being taken over by a state program. Each, as you can imagine, each one of those failing schools was in a predominantly community of color. And we tried to start a new Freedom School near or within every one of those 8 schools. We got delayed by COVID a bit, but we opened 6 of them, 6 new sites this past summer. We opened them at Old Town Elementary, Philo Hill Middle, Forest Park Elementary, Winston-Salem Preparatory Academy, Ashley Elementary, and did a community site that was intended to serve Ibrahim and Mineral Springs, but we consider that one site. So we now have 9 Freedom School sites in Forsyth County, and each of those sites serves between 50 and 80 scholars. We operate together as a collective body. We support each other. We work in our county to make sure that the impact of Freedom Schools radiates beyond these individual sites, is making a difference in the neighborhoods and also in the schools themselves. We're heading into year 6 now then for Sunnyside's site. And we're heading into year 2. Coming up next year, we'll be doing our 2nd year with all 9 sites open. And we are focused on the work that Marian Wright Edelman tasked us with. We work in very close partnership with the Winston-Salem Forsyth County School System. I meet with them pretty regularly, had 2 meetings yesterday, and it's a very strategic and creative type of conversation. We have the support of the superintendent. We work alongside the Summer Learning Extension Department and the Office of Equity and Inclusion. We meet and plan together regularly to make sure the wide impact of Freedom Schools can, we use this phrase, can transfer through the students that go through Freedom School, can transfer even through staff that might have worked at a Freedom School and become teachers at that school site. We want to make sure they take what they learned in Freedom School and bring it into the school site. We try to assist the schools in doing things like learning the impact of Harambe on the mindset of their students during the school year. Kimberly Park, for example, is a good example of this. They had a major problem with tardiness at Kimberly Park. And so for a while they said, well, everybody seems to love Harambe in the summer. Why don't we try to do some Harambe pieces in the school year? And I don't know how consistent this information is, but at that time, the tardiness problem went away. Kids wanted to be there for Harambe, opening Harambe in the morning. And that's the kind of stuff we try to let radiate out from Freedom School. It doesn't just get them there, it also impacts the course of the whole day for some of these kids. We recommend and we share books with the libraries at these schools. We share curriculum ideas. We're peddlers, really, to be honest with you. We're trying to get this stuff out there, sow these seeds. And we work to bring the wider community, as part of why I feel like I'm here with you all, to bring the wider community into this partnership with particular schools, or at least with the movement that we're trying to be a part of here, this equity movement. We're also working in partnership with Action for Equity. And I don't know if you know Action for Equity, but they're an important player in helping our school system to move to a place of greater balance in our different schools for the benefit of all kids. Action for Equity serves as that collection of non-Freedom School sites. They are our fiscal sponsor, and they are also our equity accountability partner. Our goal, and we ask for it, our goal in this partnership is to make sure each Freedom School site has equitable access to necessary resources. I mean, you already heard, we've got Wake Forest and we've got Ashley Elementary, and it sounds like there's a big disparity. It's not as big as you think. Wake Forest, we've been trying to drag them along too, to be honest with you. But the potential is there for disparities, right? And so Action for Equity helps us make sure each site has equal access to the needed resources for a successful Freedom School program. We also work with Action for Equity to make sure we're engaging and empowering parents to be leaders in their child's education and growth. We also ask that Action for Equity make sure that our relationship with the scholars is always restorative and never punitive. And we can always say we want that, but then you're in the middle of a day and you're tired and a kid makes you mad. And so, you know, it's good to have someone who's always doing inventory. How did it go today? What would you do better? And let's work on the skills, the tools you need to do better at working with children and restoring them. To that last point, I'll say Freedom Schools has provided us some really amazing opportunities in working with the school system that, you know, I mean, I'm out of my league when I find myself in these spaces. Currently, we're playing a role in helping the school system to rewrite its code of character, conduct, and support, which is a guiding document that helps the school system talk about how we will work on issues of discipline with children and youth in the school system. And we've been able to work with them to promote social emotional wellness as a driving factor in conduct and discipline issues. So, I guess I should also say real quick that Freedom Schools, at each of our sites, we want the school system to evaluate how we're doing, and we want them to look at the lives of these students who come back into their schools at the beginning of the school year, and we want to see, like, how's their attendance, how's their behavior, how's their parental engagement with the schools, things like that. But we do our own testing and evaluation too, and I think the results are impressive. A report from 2017 from that summer shows that nationally, over 80% of scholars gain or maintain their reading level from the beginning to the end of summer. And just as a kind of a barometer here, maintaining your reading level is a big success. Your natural situation is you're going to decline. It's called summer learning loss sometimes. You're going to decline without any educational opportunity. So maintaining's good, advancing is great. And in that same study, they found that the age bracket that advanced the most during freedom schools is African American middle school boys. And they do it by multiple grade levels. Like they advance over the summer at reading levels in terms of multiple grades. Attendance at freedom school sites are often in the 90% range. Just this past year, COVID 2020 was its own kind of phenomenon, and yet we went hybrid and we had 100% attendance that year. This year I thought, well, we're going to get a drop off. I don't know what happened, but we're going to get some kind of drop off. And so we said our attendance award should go to the students that reach a 95% attendance rate. And we had to raise it up higher because I couldn't afford all the awards for all the kids that were going to get it. So attendance is incredible, and it just shows the energy there. I'm so proud of the work we do at our Sunnyside Freedom School. Anthony's Plot is the organization behind that site. And Trinity Moravian, as I said, is the host for it. If you don't know about Anthony's Plot, that's a whole nother conversation, but the thing you need to know is that Anthony's Plot lives and serves the neighborhood in that Sunnyside neighborhood, and we have a responsibility to those neighbors. They are our accountability partners. And one of the main issues that was brought to our attention by the families in our neighborhood years ago is that they needed support around matters of education. They needed help. Sometimes the parents weren't able to provide the educational support that was needed on a daily basis because they're at work and aren't there to help their children sometimes to do their homework and things. They needed advocacy support. I've got a problem with the school and I don't know what to do. And schools have been getting better and better on this, but we would help them to kind of go and ask for exactly what their child needs. But also sometimes they just need something in the summer. When there's no school, we need something for our kids to do in the summer. And so with that information, we started to look around what program would help us to, in a mature way, provide this for our neighbors. And I knew of someone who in Charlotte is the biggest concentration of freedom schools in the country, actually. They have about 20-some freedom school sites. And one of my friends ran one there, and I'd seen it, and I thought, this is incredible. I want to go and study it. So we went down, we studied it, and we knew this is what we have to do for our neighborhood. It is expensive, and it is hard. It is the hardest thing I do. But we knew if we were going to be anything more than just superficial in the lives, on the critical issues in the lives of our neighbors, we had to go deep on something, and this was that something. Because we serve our neighborhood, we prioritize our neighborhood kids, our children and youth, for freedom schools. So they go to several different schools, but most of those are schools that kind of fit this gap. We've been talking about the gap. They are mostly in the schools with less resources, less support, less attention. We prioritize them, and we do a K through 12 program so that we can make sure that we bring in all of the households. So we don't want to leave some siblings behind, so we run a K through 12 freedom school site. For 50 to 65 scholars, we kind of just figure out how many we need. In recent years, we've started prioritizing also the children of Estamos Unidos, where Angelica Regalado is at, as they meet at Sunnyside Ministries, and we've gotten to know them well. They come to a lot of our events in the neighborhood, and so they also come to our Sunnyside Freedom School site. Most of our scholars walk to Freedom School in the morning, and by far the majority, like about 95%, are Hispanic or African American. Yeah, it's been a joy running Freedom School. It has been transformative for me. You know, you look for those things where, how am I not just doing something, but becoming something? And Freedom School has helped me to become. It has helped me to become more aware of my own tendencies towards, racial bias. Even as I try to be involved in all kinds of classes and programs and accountability situations that would allow me to say, I'm doing great, you know? And then I get into that space, I'm like, my goodness, I got so much work to do. I'll give you an example. The first year, we had one scholar who was hard to work with, honestly, and was standing up yelling. And I went in there and I said, you need to sit down right now. And she looked dead at me and said, you just want me to be white. And so, was that a bunch of cold water on me? No, because I'm the guy in charge. So I was like, excuse me? You know, I learned that voice even as my daughter was a toddler. And I said, excuse me? I said, I need you out here now. And so she came out and I said, what did you mean by that? And she said, and she wouldn't answer me. And I said, you know what? We had a field trip next day. You're not going on that field trip until you go home and you're going to write what you meant. You're going to articulate that and you're going to bring it back to me. And you are going to, and then we're going to talk about this and see if you should go on this field trip. And I went home that evening. I live in a community house and I was telling them what had happened. And my wife looked right at me. She's like, well, you did it. You did the very thing she said. You tried to force her into your way of her being, and you didn't even hear it. You're going to walk down there right now, and you're going to tell her she doesn't have to do that thing, and she is going on the field trip, and you'll just continue to walk this thing out together. So I did. And our lives have definitely been forever changed by that. I have so many things to unlearn. And this is the space in which I do it. And it is hard space to be in every day during the summer because of that. I'm glad I'm experiencing the difference, but I'm also proud where I see differences in the lives of our scholars. That same family, her younger daughter, kind of was coming up the same way. And she's like, I don't even need Freedom School. And she was causing a lot of problems at one point. We learned our lesson after the first year, how not to treat this, but we were still having a hard time. And so there was a lot of situations there. She pulled out of Freedom School entirely. Until last year, and she just said, I want to be in Freedom School. And she came back and she won the award for being we have a Ella Baker Award for the best leader. She won it because she really is an incredible leader. And I see that transformation happen in part because there is a safe space to be where they can see themselves in a different light, whether it's through a book or the way that her servant leader interns talk to her, these college students, whatever it is. And she started to imagine herself in that way. And now she's one of the incredible community leaders we have. On a much less dramatic scale, but equally important, we had the first family I met when I moved in 12 years ago to Anthony's Plot. Was a family in an apartment, and a young girl named Betsy lived there, and she was 8 years old at the time, and she started getting involved in our programs, and then when she was 12, she was just too cool for anything we were doing, which is fine, that just happens. Then she started showing back up when we started Freedom School and started attending it, and she graduated from the Freedom School program. And after 1 year away, she was back this year as a servant leader intern, and that is just what you want right there. You know, we're not doing for anymore, we're doing with in the deepest of ways. And I will at some point hand over the reins to this young lady to run a Freedom School. And then the thing I just love is just the culture that it brings to our whole neighborhood. Our children talk to each other differently. Sometimes when we do our Monday meals, there might be a child. There's been a gap between our Monday meals, but I remember when we were doing them regularly, and the children would show up with their book to read while they're waiting for the food to be served at our Monday meals. It's just that there's a transformation we see that's environmental as well as personal. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I wanted to try to leave a little bit of time, about 15 minutes or less if you tell me, but it's 7:30, to see if you had any questions. And then I would end by very briefly saying how you could be more involved or learn more if you like, okay? So I'm gonna be quiet if that's okay in case there are questions. Is that okay? Sometimes dump too much at a time too. I'm sorry if I did any of that. Yeah, tell me. Sure, so I'll come back to the last part, but for the cost, each Freedom School site is kind of measured in increments of 50 scholars. And so for 50 scholars, it costs about $15,000 for the curriculum. Curriculum includes all the books that come, and again, enough so that kids are taking them home and all that, and they're new books and incredible books. It includes the curriculum that is written each year, new every single year. And it includes the training for all of our staff. So about $15,000. And the cost of staffing it is right at about, I mean, the amount went up just recently, but it's about, the new amount is probably about $26,000 for the staffing. We get by, like, we have some volunteers who do roles, I do roles, and so we get by closer to $22,000. In addition to that, there are all these other costs, field trips, transportation, food, all of that. So in total, a Freedom School site generally costs about $60,000. We, over the years, have found ways to cut that down by asking for donations of items. And so usually you'll hear us present something closer to $40,000. But 60 is the real cost if you count all the values of the things donated, the materials for the classes, and so forth. So that's what it costs. We have forged some really incredible partnerships. We're writing grants right now, a multi-year grant with the United Way. We've had some really incredible single donor support for each of our sites. But we really rely on partner churches mainly to help us to cover those expenses. Yeah, you're exactly right. I appreciate you kind of highlighting that. And it is, I'll say again, it is not enough for Freedom Schools to try to deal with that. It is not a summer issue. It is a curriculum issue. And so we use Freedom Schools in this way as a catalyst for those conversations. And in the meantime, as an example of what it looks like when you do it that way, when you do pedagogy in that way.
And it builds the reading comprehension.
Yep. Yeah.
When they have the ability to have some background knowledge. It's kind of hard to teach reading comprehension when they haven't got a clue about the text at all.
Thank you for that. That's right. Betsy?
Of course, I have 3 questions.
Yeah, sure.
There's a program in Lisbon called Jump with the Sun.
Right.
So that's to get culturally appropriate books in every single school.
Yep.
Do you know if there are any overlap between their books and the Sunnyside, of the Freedom School books?
Well, there's a lot of cooperative partners in all these things. I mean, you know, there's, I think without planning, there is some overlap. And the people who are involved in both, you know, the people that are involved in both. But we don't often know what books we're getting until they show up, actually. So there's not that pre-planning on that.
Second question, there were 9 schools this summer. Do you think there will be 9 or more next summer?
Well, I kind of encouraged us in this direction. I don't feel like patting ourselves on the back until you get to year 2. We're good Moravians, and you need the second year to have a good tradition. And so I needed us to have 2 years of success before I thought we should expand again. So we are going back with the 9 sites, and then we'll look at expanding after that. But we wouldn't stop anyone who wants to. It's just from our side, we're not going to initiate it.
And the last question is there a freedom school that's associated with any of the kids that are at Diggs Latham?
Yeah, and I'm aware of that long-standing relationship between home and Diggs Latham. No, Diggs, if you were keeping up with this, Diggs test scores were really just rising about the same time that we were paying attention to where the need was, and so we didn't focus on Diggs at all. However, again, there are some sites. Cook is a good example of this. Wake Forest serves the Cook students primarily, but Cook's was having some rise at that point too. I'm not sure what it looks like now. And so we are interested in doing freedom schools at sites that aren't all failing, for sure. And Diggs is a good one for that. And if there were, but for me, as far as where my energy is able to be right now, it would come from the community, or it would come from the school. It would be the school saying, I want to learn more about that, or a community partner saying, we'd like to see it start there. Can we start that conversation? And we would love to do it, because Diggs is in the right community to do this, for sure. So we do. We do training with Triad Restorative Justice to teach our whole staff, the whole hierarchy of staff, how we're going to deal with conflict. And then we have tools that we use and implement in the school day so that our scholars can learn how to do restorative justice, which is our conflict resolution. So we do that, but we don't take the time, maybe we should do this, to teach the scholars what they're doing. We just teach our staff and we implement it. But yes, Triad Restorative Justice, run by Valerie Glass, is the program we work with to train.
Sort of a hot button issue since the fourth
It,
breakdown has been done
yep.
in school by
Yeah.
resource officer, by the way. You don't have any resource officers in your freedom school.
No, we like it that way. So the thing about freedom schools that we believe in is proactively providing the resources that are needed so that so students can talk things out. For example, like when do you have time to do any kind of talk therapy in school? And we want the community to be more involved in this too, so that we can start to pay attention to what is that child going back into? What is home like? So that's how we approach it. It's different for Anthony's Plot, but we want this for every freedom school. I have had the privilege of being in every home that my freedom school scholars come from. It's part of the relationship in the neighborhood. We want that for all of our freedom school sites, and that gets ahead of all of that. If you don't think that I got gang members that have come through my freedom school site, I got something else for you, I do. I got the siblings of gang members right now that just finished out my freedom school program. We just are approaching it head on, and it kind of keeps us from being caught in that kind of exchange, I guess, that feels like, where did that come from, Yeah. We think about it a lot.
But you said when you do your restorative practices, you're not teaching the scholars what it's about? Because with my students, I switched this year to try to do a reflection station and try to do kind of based on
We do that,
restorative
yep.
practices. And I do explain to them, okay, this is what you're going to describe what happened, and then you're going to describe
Yep.
how you feel, and what happened to someone else, and how you think they feel, and how
Right.
you're going to restore.
We do that. We just haven't stopped to kind of say, hey, here's why we do this kind of thing. But and we think we have some sites that are older, like the Winston-Salem Prep is only middle school and high school. So there's some that could really sink their teeth into these practices. They could use them out in the community. But ultimately, we do, like what you just said, we just haven't stopped to tell them, hey, this is restorative justice or whatever. Yeah. Well, let me say something real quick so I don't lose the chance to do this. If you want to learn more about Freedom School, I am happy just to talk to you one-on-one at any point. You can reach out to me. The expense is one of the most challenging pieces for sure. Freedom School, the Sunnyside Freedom School is through Anthony's Plot, so checks made out to Anthony's Plot for Freedom School, that goes directly to that program. We set it aside for it. If you want to know, the big thing for us ends up being trips. That's where we reduce things, like the field trips end up getting reduced dramatically first, and so we love to try to fundraise exactly what we need so we can provide a full experience for them. So I hate to leave with that, but money's always a good thing. But we like the partnerships, and I think the partnership is more important. So if Home Moravian is looking to learn more about culturally relevant pedagogy, to learn more about how Freedom Schools could impact Diggs Latham, or just wants to come alongside and be a part of this and this movement, we love those partnerships. We feel like those are healthier things than me coming around doing pitches and things like that. So would love to be in ongoing communication with you all. We also see this as an anti-racism movement, and so we believe that it has implications, even just books. I was telling Andrew that my daughter grows up with these books around her is a very different experience than I had, and it's a part of her anti-racist upbringing, and so we believe that that's an important thing for our Moravian churches to be doing. So if you want to just be close so you can learn more and think that way, we love those partnerships. If there's, congregational support, that's always nice, but the partnership actually means I need a better fundraiser than myself because I always walk away from money too often, but so I'll bring in someone later who says, give us the money. But we want the relationship. We want to walk side by side with you all. We want to make our Moravian church more, critically involved in these matters here locally, and so that's important to us. And the last thing is enrichment opportunities. I named all those things, STEM and broadcasting and all that kind of stuff. We love to lean into people who have gifts that they're willing to share during the summer. So those are the main things, and it all pretty much comes down to, I'd love to talk to you more if there's a specific way that we can be supportive of what you're doing or thinking, or if you have a desire to be more supportive of the Sunnyside Freedom School site. And again, you can support any of those sites that you want to that I named, but I certainly value your support with the Sunnyside site. Yeah.
Two things I know about that you didn't mention was we could do lunches for the kids during the Sunnyside, during the school session. And what was the other one? Experts that can help with the afternoon.
Yeah, that's what I meant when I said the enrichment thing. You're exactly right. Experts that can help with an afternoon activity is right on point. We do material donations too, and as we get closer, you can see chances to donate, colored pencils or whatever. But thanks for mentioning the meals. We hope to get back to having community groups make meals and either drop them off and deliver them, or cook them right in Trinity and serve them. It doesn't matter. The kids hate the food program that I have them lined up with when I have nothing else. And the food's just not that good. And they love the home-cooked meals. So we love working with churches on providing like a meal a week or something. For the lunch.
They love Takis.
Yeah, they're not gonna eat Takis all day in my school. Cool. I think I used up all my time, so I'm gonna slide out of the way here. Until I walk away, this is just up here if you wanted to see it, that's all.
To reimagine some things and know that to those of you who are here, those of you joining us online, if you would like to learn more or connect with Russ, you can reach out to me or some others that you may see here, and we can certainly connect you or stay after. Russ, we thank you, and we would like to show you that with our gratitude. So. Grace and peace to all of you this evening. So glad to be with you tonight. would love that, yeah.
Do you have radium on there? See, in my French class, I did an interpretation of this.
There we go.
It was good.